Do not, my friends, become addicted to money. It will take hold of you, and you will resent its absence. Hey, I'm Henry. I'm a doctor working in regional Australia, and this year I'm giving half of everything I earn to supporting causes that I think are making the world a better place. I think the world's a bit of a messed up place. Some of us are really lucky to be born in the right place at the right time to the right people, and we have all sorts of opportunities in the world to make our lives better and have a great life. And then other places in the world, there's really not many opportunities at all, and it's not fair. And I think some of us who have been lucky maybe have a responsibility to even the playing field a bit. I'm coming at you live from the lands of the Yorta Yorta people. It always was and always will be Aboriginal land. Now it's very hard. It's very hard to decide how to make the world a better place with money. And I'm doing it based on expert advice. I'm doing it based on grassroots knowledge, the knowledge of the people that are experiencing the world's problems. I'm doing it based on trials-based evidence. People out there running tests on what projects actually make the world a better place for people. And I'm doing it on community sort of crowdsourced knowledge as well. Information from the people that watch this and the people that know me and know what I'm doing and send me messages telling me what I'm doing right or what I'm doing wrong. So please, if you haven't sent me a message yet, I implore you to, I beg you to, please open that chat box and tell me what I'm doing right and what I'm doing wrong and who you think I should give to. So this is the website I've created for my workathon, because I'm working 40 hours a week the entire year. It's completely ridiculous. But I'm doing it for good. I'm doing it for charity. And this is the pyramid scheme. This is a breakdown of this is a graph representing my patented pyramid scheme, my donation strategy. And the strategy is I'm giving money to really great charities, and I'm giving even more money to really, really great charities. And we are in a bit of a crisis right now at the workathon because the AM charts JavaScript library that I've been using to render this chart is not quite able to. I don't think it was built to display 40 different items, but I'll have to work that out. Anyway, this is the breakdown for this month. I've given to three, not this month, this fortnight. I get a paycheck every 2 weeks. So this is the breakdown of who I've decided to give to with this paycheck. I've given to 3 different charities. There's Project Healthy Children, Gunawara, and Beyondblue, and I'll talk about them each in turn. And we'll start with Project Healthy Children. So this is one of these projects recommended by GiveWell, and GiveWell is a charity evaluator based in the US. It's sort of the centerpiece of the effective altruism movement, this particular charity evaluator, GiveWell. And the effective altruism movement is all about giving what we can to make the world a better place in the most effective way possible. And GiveWell looks at all the charities around the world and tries to pick out a few that are like really doing amazing good with relatively small amounts of money. A lot of these charities are like preventative health charities in mainly in developing countries or the global south or whatever you want to call it, countries that don't have as many resources as maybe we do in places like Australia. And there's an enormous potential to provide relatively cheap health interventions that can really improve people's lives a lot. Project Healthy Children is all about that. It's about fortifying flour with zinc, vitamin B12, folate, and iron. And this is something we actually already do in Australia to a degree. We already fortify in Australia our flour with folic acid and thiamine by law, so that it's cheap and it makes sense because it means that we don't become thiamine or folic acid deficient in the community, or we're less likely to. What Project Healthy Children does, it's mainly based in Tanzania, but I think it's based in East Africa, I think centered in Tanzania. What they do is they go to flour mills in the area and they provide the flour mills with this device called a dosifier. And these devices cost between $1,600 and $2,000 each. And they're a sort of black box with a SIM card in it. They can be monitored and activated remotely. And they release a pre-mixed micronutrient powder, kind of like a multivitamin powder containing the B12, folate, iron, and zinc into each batch of flour, so that flour then, gets distributed, baked into bread, and people are getting micronutrients they need and not becoming micronutrient deficient. And micronutrient deficiencies are, I think, enormously common around the world. According to Senku's website, it's something like, a fifth of the planet. And they can cause things like intellectual disabilities, like growth impairment. In cases of folic acid, they can cause birth defects. And I don't actually know what zinc does because I must have slept through that particular lecture. But you can imagine that the potential that this kind of project has for making positive change for relatively low cost is enormous, and that's why this kind of thing is really exciting, and probably why GiveWell has recommended it. The actual evidence, because GiveWell is pretty focused on the evidence for actual outcomes, for deciding whether a project actually makes someone's lives better. There's not great evidence for this particular project, and I think that's why GiveWell hasn't listed it in its really top rankings. It's just a highly recommended one. But you can imagine that getting data for this kind of charity, getting data for positive outcomes from this kind of thing is really, really hard, because improving someone's micronutrient status, it has impacts that are like, lifelong. The effects are subtle, not obvious, difficult to measure. But I think just because of the incredibly low cost of zinc and iron and folate and B12 and the potential it has for improving people's lives, it's a really exciting charity. So I've given them $1,600, which is conveniently enough about the amount that a dosifier costs. I know that doesn't really translate. There's admin costs in there as well, but I thought that was kind of neat. So the second charity that I'm giving to this fortnight is called Gunawara. This is an Indigenous community-based organisation run by Indigenous people for Indigenous kids and their mums. It seems like a really cool organisation. They have a really nice report. They're based in the New South Wales, by the way, in Australia, and mainly remote and regional New South Wales. They have a very nice report that explains all their projects. They have a few different things they do. They run this young Aboriginal mothers group. They do speech therapy and art therapy programs for kids in schools. They have a program for pregnant Indigenous mums, kind of providing them with health and emotional support through their pregnancy. And they also have this program called the 5 Big Ideas program, where Gunawara goes out to preschools and provides either, I think, training to teachers and resources on how to teach kids about hygiene and nutrition and basic ideas, and also to kind of teach them about their Indigenous identity. And they have these reports. They've actually done these kind of impact reports that were independently done by, I think, Sydney University. And they're trying to assess, are they actually doing any good with these impact reports? And I like the idea of doing that. It's obviously very hard, again, with this kind of project to assess what is the impact, to quantify the impact that you're having on the world. So the data in here is pretty soft. It's a lot of qualitative, like surveys. They're talking to the preschool teachers and how do they feel things are going, and they're talking to the mums from the mothers group, how do they feel things are going. But it is very sweet to read through, and there are some really nice anecdotes in here, about like the kids developing a cultural identity. They're proud that they have this language, this culture, and they're Dunguri people, and they're happy to be Dunguri people. And then there's a really cute one down here where we have a little boy who's not Aboriginal, who after doing things with my culture and my identity tells everyone, I am an Aboriginal person. I say, yup, right mate. I think it's very sweet. Their finances seem pretty concrete as well from my basic perspective. They seem to run on less than $1 million a year and don't seem to spend too much on fundraising. I have a bit of a gripe with fundraising. I understand why groups do it. I just think in an ideal world, groups wouldn't have to spend money on fundraising, because people like me, who probably have more than we need, would go out and seek causes that are really doing good things in the world. and we'd give to them without being asked. We wouldn't wait for an organisation to throw a big music festival in our honour to try and convince them to convince us to give them money. We would give without being asked. And I think we should all try and do a little bit more of that. But they seem like a really cool organisation, which is why I've given them $200 this fortnight. And then the last organisation I've given to these past 2 weeks is Beyondblue. I've given them $163, and probably most people in Australia at least are familiar with Beyondblue. They are a huge charity focused on mental health issues, kind of raising awareness and trying to help people through anxiety, depression and suicidality. And probably everyone in the country has either been directly or indirectly affected by one of those things. It's a massive organisation, gets huge amounts of funding from the government. They run on about $60 million a year, I think. They are recommended by this Australian charity evaluator called the Good Cause Co. The Good Cause Co. it's an evaluator that was started by a woman called Jessica Bowman. Jessica Bowman had a pretty classic experience where she, was trying to do good for the world, went to volunteer at an orphanage in Nepal, and then later found out that this orphanage in Nepal was actually a kind of corrupt money-making scheme that was abusing kind of everyone involved. And so she then took that disappointment and channeled it into creating this organisation called the Good Cause Co., which tries to evaluate different charities, only Australian charities, mind you, exclusively Australian charities, and tries and ensures that there's no funny business going on, and that their finances are good, that their organisational structure is reliable. And also the Good Cause Co. does try to do a bit of that assessment of impact, making sure that they are having good impact. I did read some of the Good Cause Co.'s report, and it's a little bit opaque to me how the organisation judges impact. Anyway, the Good Cause Co., one of their top recommended charities in Australia is Beyondblue, and so that's a bit of that expert advice, I thought. And then also a number of friends recommended the Beyondblue organisation for me to give to as well. So that's a bit of that kind of crowdsource knowledge that I'm relying on as well. So Beyondblue's actual operations are pretty complex. They seem to do a whole lot of things. They do public awareness campaigns, so a lot of kind of advertising stuff. They also have all these ambassadors and speakers they send around to schools and workplaces. And they also have support services, so online, and I think they have phone lines that you can get support if you're struggling with anxiety or depression or suicidality. They also have an app, things like that for anxiety. I think they do probably a whole lot of other things. It's a little bit hard to piece it together. It's also difficult to figure out how much they're spending on fundraising, if you care about that, because so much of their operations are like raising awareness of mental health issues, and in the process also raising awareness of Beyondblue. So it's very difficult to separate their fundraising activities from their actual everyday operations, which is probably why in their financial report section they haven't got a section on how much they spend on fundraising. One criticism I have is that the CEO, Georgie Harmon, who I'm sure is a fantastic CEO, does get paid $380,000 a year, which seems like quite a lot. I think if I was running a non-profit, I think I would feel a little bit uncomfortable taking $380,000 a year. But look, maybe she is truly doing such a fantastic job for the organisation that she is worth that and needs to be paid that amount. It's a little bit hard to say. I find it a little bit disillusioning, and maybe would put a few people off donating. Anyway, that's the breakdown for this particular month. I am super keen to hear from anyone out there on what you guys think I'm doing right or wrong, or who I could be giving to, who I shouldn't be giving to. Maybe I've been making mistakes. I don't know. I'm just trying to do the best I can to make the world better. If you have suggestions for another way to do it, I would absolutely love to hear it. Love you all. Keep going.